The dust settled in the distance as Natalie Owens squinted at the approaching figure on horseback, her heart momentarily forgetting how to beat. She'd spent 15 years convincing herself that love was a luxury she could live without, that memories faded like the paint on an abandoned storefront. But as the rider drew closer, his silhouette etched against the golden horizon of 1887 New Mexico territory, her carefully constructed fortress began to crumble. Natalie turned away, busying herself with the sign she'd been painting for her mercantile. Silverton had changed since she'd arrived a decade ago from a mining camp to a proper town with a school, church, and respectable businesses like her own. She'd built something here, something that belonged to her alone. "Miss Owens," the familiar baritone voice called out, stopping her brush mid-stroke. Time hadn't changed the way he said her name. Natalie steeled herself before turning to face him. Liam Hayes sat atop his dun stallion, looking as though he'd been carved from the same rugged landscape that surrounded them. His face was more weathered, his eyes deeper set, but unmistakably the same man who'd promised to come back for her all those years ago. "Mr. Hayes," she responded, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the tremor in her hands. "What brings you to Silverton?" Liam dismounted with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as they hit the ground. "Business," he said simply, leading his horse closer. "And some unfinished matters." The late afternoon sun caught the silver strands peppered through his dark hair. He'd been 23 when they'd last seen each other. Now, like her, he'd crossed into his late 30s, the boyish charm replaced by something more substantial. "Well," Natalie said, turning back to her sign, "Silverton's a fine place for business these days. The silver mines are producing well." "You've done well for yourself," Liam observed, glancing at the storefront with her name painted in elegant script. "Always knew you would?" Natalie dipped her brush, focusing on the curves of the letter she was painting. "Did you? Seems to me you didn't know much about me at all." A tense silence stretched between them, filled with 15 years of unspoken words. Around them, Silverton continued its daily business, miners heading to the saloon after their shift, women shopping for supplies, children racing home before supper. "I need supplies," Liam finally said. "Mind if I come in?" Natalie nodded curtly and led him inside. The bell above the door announced their entrance, its cheerful tinkle at odds with the heaviness between them. The mercantile smelled of coffee beans, leather, and fresh fabric, a testament to the variety of goods Natalie had curated over the years. "What can I help you with?" she asked, moving behind the counter. "Traveling supplies? Coffee? Jerky? Flour?" Liam listed as he removed his hat, revealing the full extent of his dark hair, now threaded with silver at the temples. "Planning to head up to the high country for a spell." As Natalie gathered his items, she felt his eyes following her movements. "Still ranching?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from actual curiosity. "Got a spread about 40 miles south," Liam confirmed. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine. 500 head of cattle, decent grazing land." Natalie nodded, tallying his purchases in her ledger. "That'll be $3.45. Liam reached into his pocket and placed the coins on the counter. Their fingers brushed as she collected them, sending an unwelcome jolt through her body. 15 years hadn't dulled that, at least. "How long have you been in Silverton?" he asked as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper. 10 years this October," Natalie replied. "Came here after my father passed." Liam's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear about your pa. He was a good man." "Yes," she agreed. "He was." Another silence fell between them, this one edged with less hostility and more shared memories. Natalie tied the package with string, her fingers working the familiar knots. "I heard you married," Liam said abruptly. Natalie's hands stilled for just a moment. "I did." Richard Callahan, he was a mining engineer. Was? He died 3 years ago. Cave in at the Blue Ridge mine. She pushed the package across the counter. Will that be all, Mr. Hayes? Liam didn't take the package immediately. I'm sorry for your loss, Natalie. The use of her first name caught her off guard. Thank you. Life continues, as they say. That it does, Liam agreed, finally taking his supplies. He turned toward the door but paused before opening it. I'm staying at the Silver Dollar Hotel. I'll be in town for a few days. Natalie gave him a non-committal nod, relieved when the door closed behind him. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the stool behind the counter, her hands shaking as she pressed them against her face. Of all the mining towns in the West, Liam Hayes had to walk into hers. The evening brought a welcome distraction in the form of dinner with her friend, Clara Wilson, the town's schoolteacher. Clara's boarding house had a small dining room where they often shared meals and conversation. You look like you've seen a ghost, Clara remarked as she ladled stew into Natalie's bowl. Something like that, Natalie replied, breaking off a piece of cornbread. Liam Hayes came into the store today. Clara's eyes widened. The Liam Hayes? The one who— Yes, that one, Natalie interrupted. He's apparently ranching south of here now. My, Clara murmured, settling into her chair. After all these years, what did he want? Supplies, he said. Natalie stirred her stew without eating it. He's staying in town for a few days. Clara studied her friend. And how do you feel about that? Natalie sighed. I don't know. Surprised. Angry, perhaps. Mostly I'm wondering why he's really here. Maybe he came looking for you, Clara suggested. After 15 years? That seems unlikely. People do strange things for love, Clara said softly. Natalie scoffed. Love? If that was love, I want no part of it. The conversation shifted to town gossip and school matters, but Natalie's mind remained fixed on the unexpected encounter. After dinner, she walked home alone, the cool evening air clearing her thoughts somewhat. Her house stood a short distance from the mercantile, a modest 2-story structure she'd purchased after Richard's death, unwilling to remain in the home they'd shared. As she prepared for bed, Natalie found herself standing before the small cedar chest she kept on her dresser. Inside, beneath neatly folded handkerchiefs and letters from her late mother, lay a small package wrapped in faded calico. For a moment, her fingers hovered over it, but she closed the chest without touching it. Some memories were better left undisturbed. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of September day that made the mountains seem close enough to touch. Natalie opened the mercantile at 7, as she did every day except Sundays. The morning passed in a familiar routine of inventory, customer service, and bookkeeping. Shortly before noon, the bell above the door jingled and Natalie looked up to see Sheriff Thomas Miller entering. Morning, Natalie, he greeted her, tipping his hat. Got those ledgers I ordered? Just arrived yesterday, she confirmed, retrieving a package from beneath the counter. Finest quality from Denver. Thomas smiled appreciatively. You always know how to find the good stuff. As they discussed the recent shipment, the door opened again. Liam walked in, his gaze immediately finding Natalie's. Thomas noticed the change in her demeanor and turned to look at the newcomer. Mr. Hayes? Natalie acknowledged stiffly. Miss Owens, Liam returned with a nod. Sheriff, he added, noting Thomas's badge. Don't believe we've met, Thomas said, extending his hand. Sheriff Thomas Miller. Liam Hayes, came the reply as they shook hands. Just passing through. Got a ranch down near Cimarron. Hayes, Thomas repeated thoughtfully. You wouldn't be the same Hayes who brought in the Burroughs gang last year? A hint of surprise crossed Liam's face. That was me. Didn't think the news had traveled this far. Thomas chuckled. When someone brings in 3 of the most wanted men in the territory single-handedly, Word gets around. That was fine work. Natalie glanced between them, processing this new information. The Burrows gang? She asked, despite herself. Nasty piece of work, Thomas explained. Robbed 2 stagecoaches and killed 4 people before Mr. Hayes here tracked them down. Liam shifted uncomfortably under Natalie's surprised gaze. I was just in the right place at the right time. Modesty won't change the facts, Thomas said. You're welcome in Silverton anytime, Mr. Hayes. He turned back to Natalie. Thanks for the ledgers. I'll see you at the town meeting tomorrow. After the sheriff departed, an awkward silence filled the store. Liam removed his hat, running his fingers through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Natalie's heart ache. Didn't mean to interrupt your business, he said. You didn't, she replied automatically. What can I help you with today? Liam stepped further into the store. Actually, I came to ask if you'd join me for dinner tonight, at the hotel restaurant. The directness of his invitation startled her. Mr. Hayes. Liam, he corrected gently. You used to call me Liam. That was a long time ago, Natalie said, her voice hardening. And I don't think dinner would be appropriate. Just a meal between old friends, he persisted, to catch up. Are we friends? She challenged. Liam's expression grew serious. I'd like to think we could be, Natalie, despite everything. A customer entered, saving her from responding immediately. While Natalie helped the woman find fabric for a new dress, she felt Liam's presence like a physical weight. When the customer left, he was still there, waiting patiently. 7 o'clock, he said, placing his hat back on his head. I'll be there whether you come or not. After he left, Natalie found herself staring at the spot where he'd stood. The invitation hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Part of her wanted to refuse out of principle, but another part, a part she thought she'd buried years ago, was curious. Why had he really come to Silverton? By closing time, Natalie had convinced herself not to go, then changed her mind at least 3 times. She locked up the store and walked home, the setting sun casting long shadows across the street. In her bedroom, she stared at her wardrobe, mentally cataloging its contents. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself. It's just dinner. In the end, she chose a dark blue dress she rarely wore, not her finest, but certainly not everyday attire either. She pinned her hair up, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and dabbed a hint of rose water behind her ears. The Silver Dollar Hotel stood at the north end of Main Street, its white painted facade and green shutters marking it as one of Silverton's more refined establishments. Natalie paused outside, gathering her courage before entering the lobby. The restaurant occupied the first floor, its tables covered with white cloths and illuminated by oil lamps. Liam sat near the window, dressed in a clean shirt and vest that suggested he'd made an effort for the occasion. He stood when he saw her, a smile spreading across his face. You came, he said, pulling out her chair. I was curious, Natalie admitted as she sat. It's not every day that ghosts from the past appear in my store. Liam's smile faltered slightly as he retook his seat. Is that how you see me? As a ghost? What would you call someone who vanishes without a trace for 15 years, then suddenly reappears as if nothing happened? A waiter approached with menus, postponing Liam's response. They ordered roast beef for him, chicken for her, and fell into an uneasy silence after the waiter departed. You're right to be angry, Liam finally said. I owe you an explanation. Natalie folded her hands in her lap. I stopped expecting explanations a long time ago. Nevertheless, you deserve one. Liam leaned forward, his eyes earnest. When I left San Antonio in '72, I fully intended to come back for you. I had plans, a small piece of land in mind, enough money saved for a modest start. But, Natalie prompted when he paused. But life had other ideas, Liam continued. I got as far as Fort Worth when I received word that my brother had been killed, shot dead over a gambling dispute in Dodge City. This was news to Natalie. Your brother? You never mentioned a brother. Nathan was 8 years older. We weren't close growing up. He left home when I was still a boy, but he was family. Liam's expression darkened with the memory. I went to Dodge to claim his body, found myself caught up in identifying the men responsible. The waiter returned with their food, creating another pause in the conversation. When they were alone again, Liam continued. It took me 3 months to track down the men who killed Nathan. By then, I'd fallen in with a group of rangers. They offered me a position, and I accepted. You became a lawman, Natalie said, understanding dawning. Liam nodded. For 7 years. Dangerous work, constant moving. No place for a wife, no stability to offer. He met her eyes. I convinced myself you were better off without me. Natalie cut into her chicken, giving herself a moment to process this information. You could have written, she said finally. A letter would have taken little effort. You're right, Liam acknowledged. I should have. At first, I thought it would be temporary, that I'd come back with something more to offer. Then time passed, and I figured you'd moved on. Writing seemed selfish. Selfish? Natalie repeated incredulously. Do you know what it was like, waiting, watching the stage arrive every day, hoping for a letter that never came? Defending you to my father who said from the beginning you wouldn't return? Her voice cracked slightly. The selfish thing was leaving me in limbo. Liam's expression was pained. I can't change the past, Natalie. I made mistakes, many of them. All I can say is that I never forgot you. Yet you made no effort to find me until now, she pointed out. Why? Liam hesitated, then reached into his vest pocket. Because of this. He placed something on the table between them, a length of faded blue ribbon, carefully folded. Natalie stared at it, recognition washing over her like cold water. My ribbon, she whispered. Liam nodded. The one you tied around my wrist the day I left. You said it would bring me luck. Natalie remembered that day with painful clarity, the early morning parting at her father's ranch outside San Antonio, the promises exchanged, the tears she'd fought to hide. The ribbon had been from her hair, hastily removed and tied around his wrist as a token. You kept it, she said, amazed despite herself. All this time? It's been with me through everything, Liam confirmed. Gunfights, blizzards, river crossings, never took it off. Natalie struggled to reconcile the sentiment of this gesture with 15 years of silence. I don't understand. If you cared enough to keep this, why? I told myself I was protecting you, Liam interrupted. The life I was leading wasn't fit for sharing, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of not being enough. Of failing you. Liam's voice grew softer. Of loving someone and losing them, like I lost Nathan. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Natalie stared at the ribbon, her emotions in turmoil. Part of her wanted to gather it up, to reclaim this piece of her past. Another part wanted to leave it on the table, along with all the pain it represented. So why now? She asked. Why come looking for me after all these years? Liam took a deep breath. I left the Rangers 5 years ago, started ranching, built something stable, something that could support a family. Then last month, I was in Santa Fe and overheard a trader mention a widow Owens who ran the finest mercantile in Silverton. It seemed too specific to be coincidence. So you came to see if it was me? Natalie concluded. I came because I never stopped wondering what might have been, Liam corrected. I came because every time I looked at this ribbon, I remembered the girl who gave it to me and the promise I failed to keep. They ate in silence for several minutes, the weight of the past heavy between them. Finally, Natalie spoke again. I waited for you for 3 years, she said quietly. Every day, a little hope died. Eventually, my father convinced me to accept Richard's proposal. He was kind, stable, everything my father wanted for me. Did you love him? Liam asked, the question surprisingly gentle. Natalie considered her answer carefully. I cared for him deeply. We had a good marriage. Not passionate, perhaps, but respectful, comfortable. You deserved more than comfortable, Liam said. What I deserved and what life offered were two different things, Natalie replied. After you, I decided reliable was better than passionate but absent. Their plates were cleared and they declined dessert. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Liam picked up the ribbon. This belongs to you, he said, offering it to her. Natalie looked at it for a long moment. Keep it, she finally said. It's been yours longer than it was ever mine. Outside the hotel, they stood in the quiet street, the town mostly settled for the night. A few windows glowed with lamplight, and stars peppered the clear sky above. May I walk you home? Liam asked. Natalie nodded, and they began the short journey in silence. The night air carried the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains, mixing with the familiar smells of the town wood smoke, horses, the faint metallic hint of the nearby mines. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Liam said as they approached her house. Just a chance to know the woman you've become. Natalie stopped at her gate, turning to face him. I don't know if that's possible, Liam. Too much time has passed. We're different people now. Maybe, he acknowledged, but I'd like to find out who those people are. She studied him in the moonlight. This man who had once been the center of her world. The years had changed him, as they had changed her. Whether those changes had made them incompatible or simply more suited to each other now remained to be seen. I close the store early on Saturdays, she said finally. At 2. If you'd like to come by then, perhaps we could talk more. Hope flickered in Liam's eyes. I'll be there. Natalie nodded, then turned and walked up the path to her door. She didn't look back, but she felt his presence until she was safely inside. That night, she retrieved the cedar chest and opened the package inside. A collection of letters, never sent. Pages filled with her heart's outpourings, dated over those first 3 years after Liam left. Accusations, pleas, declarations of love and hate, all the emotions she'd been too proud to show anyone else. In the flickering lamplight, Natalie read them one by one, reconnecting with the young woman she'd been. When she finished, she carefully rewrapped them and returned the package to the chest. The past couldn't be changed, but perhaps it didn't have to define the future. Saturday morning brought clear skies and a steady stream of customers to the mercantile. Natalie moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, though her mind frequently drifted to the approaching afternoon. By 1:30, the store had emptied, and she began her closing routine. At precisely 2 o'clock, the bell above the door announced Liam's arrival. He wore a clean shirt, his hat in his hands, looking surprisingly nervous. Right on time, Natalie observed, locking the cash drawer. Didn't want to waste a minute, Liam replied. What did you have in mind for this afternoon? Natalie hesitated. She hadn't planned beyond agreeing to meet him. There's a spot by the river I like to visit sometimes. It's peaceful. We could walk there, if you'd like. Liam nodded. Lead the way. They left the store, walking west toward the edge of town. As they passed the livery stable, a young boy called out to Natalie. Miss Owens, Pa says to tell you the fabric shipment's coming on Monday's stage. Thank you, Joey, she replied with a smile. Tell your father I appreciate the message. As they continued walking, Liam glanced at her. You seem well established here. Everyone knows you. Small towns, Natalie explained. It's impossible to remain anonymous. But yes, I've built a life here. The store does well. I serve on the town council. I have friends. You should be proud, Liam said sincerely. Building something from nothing takes courage. They reached the outskirts of town and followed a narrow path that wound through cottonwoods toward the river. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they approached. Richard and I used to come here on Sundays, Natalie said as they emerged from the trees to a small clearing beside the river. A large flat rock overlooked a bend where the water slowed, creating a deep pool before continuing its journey downstream. It was his favorite spot to fish. Liam took in the scene, the mountains rising in the distance, the clear water flowing over smooth stones, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves overhead. I can see why, he said. It's beautiful. They settled on the rock, watching the water flow past. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the tension between them easing somewhat in the peaceful setting. Tell me about your ranch, Natalie finally said. Liam's expression brightened. It's in a valley with good water access. Took me 2 years to build the house myself, nothing fancy, but solid. 4 rooms downstairs, 2 up. Barn, corral, smokehouse. Pride colored his voice. The cattle are doing well. Started with 50 head, now have 10 times that. Sounds like you found your place, Natalie observed. The land, yes, Liam agreed. But a house isn't always a home. The implication hung between them, neither acknowledging it directly. What about you? Liam asked. How did you come to own a mercantile? Natalie gazed out at the water. After father died, I sold the ranch. It was too much for me to manage alone. And the memories. She shook her head. I wanted a fresh start. Came north with the money and looked for a town that needed a good store. Silverton was growing but lacked proper supplies. The timing was right. You always did have a head for business, Liam recalled. Remember when you convinced your father to breed those quarter horses instead of just cattle? Made him a small fortune. Natalie smiled at the memory. He grumbled the entire time, then took all the credit when it worked. Your mother would have been proud, Liam said softly, seeing what you've accomplished. The mention of her mother, who had died when Natalie was 16, touched her deeply. I like to think so. A hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing across the water. Below, a fish jumped, creating ripples that spread in perfect circles. I've often wondered, Liam said, breaking another comfortable silence, if you had children. Natalie's expression clouded slightly. No. Richard and I tried, but it wasn't meant to be. I'm sorry, Liam said, genuine regret in his voice. It was difficult at first, she admitted. But I've made peace with it. The children at the school call me Aunt Natalie. I help with reading lessons once a week. It's enough. You'd have been a wonderful mother, Liam said. Natalie glanced at him. What about you? Did you ever marry? Liam shook his head. No. Came close once, about 8 years ago. A widow in Amarillo with 2 young boys. But something held me back. He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Or someone, I suppose. The confession stirred emotions Natalie had long suppressed. That's not fair, Liam. You can't claim I was the reason you didn't build a life with someone else. Not when you chose to leave. You're right, he acknowledged. It's not fair to put that on you. The truth is, I was the problem. Too restless, too caught up in the past to fully commit to a future. They fell silent again, each lost in private thoughts. The sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains, casting longer shadows across the water. We should head back, Natalie said eventually. It'll be dark soon. They walked the path in silence, though it felt less strained than before. As they reached the edge of town, Liam spoke again. Would you allow me to call on you tomorrow? Perhaps attend church together? Natalie considered the request. Sunday services were a social affair in Silverton, and being seen with Liam would certainly spark gossip. Yet the prospect didn't disturb her as much as it might have yesterday. "All right," she agreed. "Service starts at 10. You can meet me at my house at 9:30. Liam's smile was warm. "Thank you, Natalie." He walked her to her door, keeping a respectful distance. "I enjoyed today," he said as they reached her porch. "So did I," Natalie admitted, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. "Good night, Liam." "Good night," he replied, tipping his hat before turning to leave. Natalie watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the twilight sky. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what might still be possible between them. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Natalie chose her best dress for church, a dark green wool with a fitted bodice and modest bustle. She arranged her hair carefully, securing it with tortoiseshell combs that had belonged to her mother. Liam arrived precisely at 9:30, wearing a dark suit that suggested it wasn't often used. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, looking every bit the respectable rancher. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely. "Thank you," Natalie replied, accepting his offered arm as they began walking toward the church. "You clean up nicely yourself." The church stood at the center of town, its white steeple visible from most streets. As they approached, Natalie noted the curious glances from other churchgoers. She recognized the moment when Clara spotted them, her friend's eyes widening in surprise before breaking into a knowing smile. They took seats in the middle of the congregation, and Natalie was acutely aware of Liam beside her, the crisp scent of his shaving soap, the warmth of his presence, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed hers during the hymns. Reverend Parker's sermon focused on forgiveness and second chances, a coincidence that wasn't lost on either of them. When the collection plate came around, Liam placed a generous donation inside, earning an approving nod from the Reverend. After the service, they stood in the churchyard, receiving the not-so-subtle scrutiny of the community. Clara was the first to approach. "Natalie, aren't you going to introduce your friend?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Clara Wilson, this is Liam Hayes," Natalie said. "Clara teaches at our school." "A pleasure, Miss Wilson," Liam said, shaking her hand. "Mr. Hayes," Clara returned, "I've heard so much about you." Natalie shot her a warning glance, which Clara cheerfully ignored. "Will you be staying in Silverton long?" Clara asked innocently. "That depends on a number of factors," Liam replied diplomatically. Before Clara could press further, Sheriff Miller joined them. "Hayes, good to see you at service," he said. "Got a minute? Wanted to ask you about those tracking techniques you mentioned yesterday." As the men stepped aside to talk, Clara leaned close to Natalie. "Well, well," she murmured. "Seems your ghost has quite substantial form, and quite handsome, too." "It's not what you think," Natalie protested. "No?" Clara's eyebrow arched skeptically. "The way he looks at you suggests otherwise." "How does he look at me?" Natalie asked before she could stop herself. Clara smiled. "Like a man who's found something precious he thought was lost forever." Natalie's cheeks warmed. "It's complicated, Clara." "The best things usually are," her friend replied sagely. "Just don't let pride keep you from happiness, Natalie. Life offers few second chances." When Liam returned, he extended an invitation. "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner at my camp tonight. It's just outside town, by the creek." Natalie hesitated, aware of Clara's encouraging expression beside her. "That sounds nice," she finally agreed. "I'll come for you at 6, Liam said, his eyes warm with pleasure at her acceptance. As they parted ways, Liam heading to his camp to prepare, Natalie walking home with Clara, her friend squeezed her arm. "Give him a chance, Nat," Clara said softly. "I've known you for 8 years, and I've never seen that look in your eyes before." "What look?" Natalie asked. "Hope," Clara replied simply. At home, Natalie changed into a simpler dress, more suitable for an outdoor meal. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance nevertheless, pinning her hair in a looser style and adding a touch of color to her lips. Liam arrived promptly at 6, this time mounted on his dun stallion with another gentler-looking mare beside him. "Thought we might ride," he explained. "It's not far, but the path is rough in spots." Natalie eyed the mare critically. "It's been some time since I've ridden." "Daisy's gentle as they come," Liam assured her. "Brought her specifically with you in mind." With Liam's assistance, Natalie mounted the mare, surprised at how quickly the old skills returned. They rode at a leisurely pace, following the creek away from town until they reached a small clearing where Liam had established his camp. A canvas tent stood near the trees, and a fire pit had been prepared with care. Nearby, a simple table had been fashioned from boards and stumps, covered with a clean cloth. The setting sun cast a golden glow over everything, lending a magical quality to the scene. "This is lovely," Natalie said as Liam helped her dismount. "Wanted it to be special," he replied, tying the horses to a nearby tree where they could graze. "Hope you're hungry. I've been cooking all afternoon." The meal proved to be simple but delicious venison steaks, potatoes roasted in the coals, and wild greens Liam had gathered that morning. They ate by firelight as darkness fell, the flames casting dancing shadows across their faces. "You've become quite the cook," Natalie observed, accepting a cup of coffee after the meal. "Necessity," Liam chuckled. "Gets lonely out on the range, had to learn or starve." "I remember your attempts at cooking on cattle drives," Natalie reminisced. "Father said your biscuits could break a man's tooth." "He wasn't wrong," Liam admitted with a laugh. "Took years to master the art of not burning everything." The easy conversation continued as they watched the fire, memories flowing more freely now, the bitter edges softened by time and the pleasant evening. "Do you remember the dance at the Collins farm?" Liam asked. "Must have been the summer of '71. Natalie smiled at the memory. "How could I forget? You stepped on my toes so many times I could barely walk the next day." "In my defense, I'd never danced before," Liam protested good-naturedly. "And yet you insisted on asking me for every single dance," Natalie pointed out. Liam's expression grew more serious. "Couldn't bear the thought of anyone else holding you." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Natalie stared into the fire, aware of Liam's gaze on her profile. "We were so young then," she said softly. "Yes," Liam agreed. "Too young to understand what we had. Too young to know how rare it is to find someone who fits you so perfectly." Natalie met his eyes across the fire. "And now?" "Now I understand exactly what I lost," Liam said, his voice low and certain. "What I'm hoping isn't lost forever." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the blue ribbon. "This kept me alive more times than I can count. Not as a lucky charm, but as a reminder that someone once believed in me enough to wait." Natalie swallowed hard, emotion rising in her throat. "Liam." "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he interrupted gently. "Just time. Time to show you who I am now. Time to earn back your trust, if that's possible." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside her. For 15 years, Natalie had built walls around her heart, protecting herself from the pain of abandonment. Yet here, in this moment, she found herself wondering if those walls might be more prison than protection. "Time," she repeated thoughtfully. "I think I can give that." Relief washed over Liam's features. "That's all I ask." As the evening grew cooler, Liam added wood to the fire. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek's gentle murmur and the occasional call of a night bird. "How long will you stay in Silverton?" Natalie finally asked, the question that had been hovering in her thoughts. "I'd planned a week," Liam replied, but my foreman can handle things at the ranch for longer if needed. And then? Liam studied her across the flames. That depends on what I find here. The implication was clear, and Natalie felt a flutter of both anticipation and fear. We should head back soon, she said, changing the subject. It's getting late. Liam nodded, though reluctance showed in his expression. They doused the fire carefully before mounting their horses for the return journey. The night had grown darker, but a bright three-quarter moon illuminated their path. As they rode side by side, Liam spoke again. Would you consider riding out to see my ranch sometime? It's a day's journey each way, but I think you'd like it. The invitation surprised her. That would be quite an undertaking. We could make it a proper trip, Liam suggested. Take a few days. I'd ensure everything was respectable, of course. Natalie considered the proposal. Let me think about it. They reached her house too soon, the ride back seeming much shorter than the journey out. Liam helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for tonight, he said, walking her to her door. It meant a great deal to me. I enjoyed it too, Natalie admitted. Good night, Liam. He tipped his hat, a smile warming his features. Good night, Natalie. She watched from her window as he rode away, leading Daisy behind him. The evening had changed something between them, not erasing the past, but perhaps creating space for a different future. The following days fell into a pattern. Liam would visit the store in the mornings, often bringing coffee and pastries from the hotel. They would talk between customers, learning the contours of each other's lives over the intervening years. In the evenings, they would walk or ride, exploring the countryside around Silverton. On Wednesday, Liam accompanied Natalie to her weekly reading session at the school, watching with undisguised admiration as she captivated the children with tales of frontier life. Afterward, he surprised her by producing a book of his own, a collection of Aesop's fables with beautiful illustrations. For the school, he explained as the children crowded around to see. Every child should have good stories. By Friday, the whispers and curious glances from townspeople had evolved into knowing smiles and friendly greetings. Sheriff Miller had taken to inviting Liam for morning coffee at his office, while Clara made no secret of her approval. He's different than I expected, Clara commented as she helped Natalie organize new inventory. The way you described him, I imagined some reckless cowboy with more charm than substance. Natalie shelved a bolt of calico, considering her friend's observation. He has changed. Or perhaps I never truly knew him before. Either way, he clearly adores you, Clara said. Yesterday at the post office, Mrs. Thornton asked him about his ranch, and he spent 10 minutes describing how perfect it would be for your mercantile skills. Natural expansion opportunity, he called it. Natalie paused, a tin of buttons in her hand. He said that? Clara nodded. He's planning a future with you, Nat. Question is, are you considering one with him? The question lingered in Natalie's mind that evening as she prepared for dinner at the hotel, their last scheduled meal before Liam was due to return to his ranch the following day. She chose her finest dress for the occasion, a deep burgundy silk she'd ordered from Denver after Richard's death, but rarely had cause to wear. At the hotel restaurant, Liam stood when she entered, his expression confirming she'd made the right choice. You look stunning, he said softly as he held her chair. The table was set with the hotel's best china and crystal, a small bouquet of wildflowers at its center. Candlelight flickered between them, catching the silver in Liam's hair and the warmth in his eyes. Hard to believe a week has passed already, Natalie remarked after they'd ordered. Fastest week of my life, Liam agreed, and the most important. Their conversation flowed easily through the meal, punctuated by comfortable silences that no longer felt awkward. As they finished dessert apple tart with cinnamon cream, Liam reached across the table to take her hand. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said, his thumb gently stroking her fingers. But I need you to know that this isn't an ending. Not for me. Natalie felt her heart quicken. What is it then? A beginning, I hope. Liam's gaze held hers. I meant what I said before. I built my ranch with a future in mind, a future I once thought was lost to me. Liam. Let me finish, he requested gently. I'm not asking for promises tonight, just that you'll consider visiting the ranch. See the life I've built. Give us a chance to discover if there's still something worth building together. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Over the past week, Natalie had found herself increasingly drawn to this mature version of Liam, more thoughtful than the impetuous young man she'd once loved, yet still possessing the core qualities that had captured her heart all those years ago. I'd like to see your ranch, she said finally. Perhaps next month, when my quarterly inventory is complete. Joy lit Liam's features. I'll make all the arrangements. Clara could accompany you as chaperone, if that would make you more comfortable. Natalie smiled at his consideration. That seems appropriate. They lingered over coffee, reluctant to end the evening. When they finally left the restaurant, the night was clear and cool, stars scattered like diamonds across the dark sky. Liam offered his arm for the walk to her house, and Natalie took it without hesitation. What time do you leave tomorrow? She asked as they strolled through the quiet streets. First light, Liam replied. Long ride ahead. They reached her gate all too quickly. Liam turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. These days with you have meant everything to me, Natalie. To me as well, she admitted softly. Liam hesitated, then slowly reached up to touch her cheek. May I write to you? Properly this time? Natalie leaned slightly into his touch. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Something shifted in Liam's expression, a decision made. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief, tender, a question rather than a demand. When he pulled back, Natalie found herself breathless, emotions she'd long buried rising to the surface like spring water. Until next month, Liam murmured, his voice husky. Until then, she agreed. That night, Natalie stood at her bedroom window long after Liam had disappeared from view, her fingers occasionally rising to touch her lips. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, constant and unchanging despite the passage of time. Perhaps some things remained true, no matter how many years passed between them. Morning came too quickly, the sun barely cresting the eastern mountains when Natalie heard hoofbeats outside her house. She hurried to the window, still in her nightdress, to see Liam mounted and ready for travel. He spotted her and tipped his hat, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. Without thinking, Natalie opened the window. Safe journey, she called softly. Liam's smile warmed her even across the distance. I'll be counting the days, he replied. She watched until he disappeared around the bend in the road, then slowly dressed for the day ahead. The store wouldn't open itself, and life in Silverton continued regardless of matters of the heart. Yet as she pinned her hair, Natalie acknowledged that something fundamental had changed. The carefully constructed independence she'd built over the years hadn't crumbled, but it had shifted, making room for new possibilities. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Liam wrote regularly long, detailed letters describing his ranch, the cattle, the changing seasons in the valley. Each envelope also contained a pressed wildflower or leaf, small tokens of the place he hoped she would come to love. Natalie replied with equal care, sharing the daily life of Silverton and her own reflections on their renewed connection. With each exchange, the years of silence between them seemed to fade further into the past. October arrived with a blaze of golden aspen leaves and crisp mornings. Natalie completed her inventory ahead of schedule, confirming with Clara that she could accompany her on the journey to Liam's ranch. They planned to depart on the 15th, traveling by stagecoach to the nearest town before Liam would meet them for the final leg of the journey. 3 days before their scheduled departure, Natalie was closing the store when Sheriff Miller appeared at her door. "Evening, Natalie," he greeted her, his expression unusually serious. "Got a moment?" "Of course, Thomas," she replied, noting the telegram in his hand with sudden apprehension. "Is something wrong?" The sheriff hesitated. "Got a wire from the sheriff in Cimarron. There was trouble at Hayes's ranch yesterday. Cattle rustlers." Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. "Liam, is he—" "He's alive," Thomas assured her quickly. "But he was shot during the confrontation. Doc patched him up. But he's in rough shape." Relief and fresh anxiety warred within her. "How bad is it?" "Wire doesn't say specifically, just that he's asking for you." Thomas handed her the telegram. "Thought you'd want to know right away." Natalie read the brief message, her hands trembling slightly. "I need to go to him." Thomas nodded. "Figured you'd say that. Stage leaves for Cimarron at first light. I've already spoken to the driver. He'll hold a seat for you." "Thank you," Natalie said, her mind already racing through preparations. "I'd offer to accompany you, but—" "You're needed here," Natalie finished for him. "I understand. I'll manage." After the sheriff left, Natalie moved with purposeful efficiency. She closed the store, leaving a note explaining her emergency absence, then hurried home to pack. As she folded clothes into her traveling bag, her eyes fell on the cedar chest. Without hesitation, she opened it and removed the small package of letters. After a moment's consideration, she added them to her bag. Some conversations were best had in person. Clara arrived shortly after, having heard the news from the sheriff. "I'm coming with you," she announced, brooking no argument, "already packed and arranged for Miss Peterson to cover my classes." Natalie embraced her friend gratefully. "I was hoping you'd say that." They were at the stage depot before dawn, their breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. The journey to Cimarron would take most of the day, the road winding through mountain passes that were already seeing the first dusting of snow. As the stage rattled and swayed along the rough road, Natalie stared out the window at the passing landscape, her thoughts fixed on Liam. After finding each other again after so many years, the possibility of losing him now was unbearable. By late afternoon, the stage rolled into Cimarron, a town larger than Silverton but with the same frontier character. The sheriff's office was their first stop, where they learned that Liam had been moved from the doctor's office to his ranch the previous day, insisting he would recover better on his own property. "Stubborn fool," the Cimarron sheriff commented, though not unkindly. "Took a bullet in the shoulder and another grazed his side. Lost a fair amount of blood, but Doc says he'll mend if infection doesn't set in." "We need to get to his ranch," Natalie said firmly. "Is there transportation available?" "I can arrange a wagon," the sheriff offered. "But it's nearly sunset. The ranch is a good 2 hours from here. Rough country in the dark." Clara touched Natalie's arm. "Perhaps we should stay in town tonight and set out first thing tomorrow." Logic suggested this was the sensible course, but Natalie's heart rebelled at the delay. "I need to see him today," she insisted. "If you can provide directions, we'll hire whatever transportation is available." Her determination must have been evident, for the sheriff nodded. "I'll do better than that. My deputy is heading that way regardless, escorting one of the rustlers we caught to identify his partners. He can take you in the department wagon." An hour later, they were bouncing along a rutted road in the back of a sturdy wagon, the deputy maintaining a steady pace despite the fading light. Clara had wrapped them both in blankets against the evening chill, and Natalie clutched her traveling bag, counting the minutes. The landscape opened up as they descended from the foothills into a broad valley cradled by distant mountains. In the last glow of twilight, Natalie caught her first glimpse of Liam's ranch, a substantial log house with a wide porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings. all nestled against a backdrop of pine forest. Lamplight glowed from the windows, a beacon in the gathering darkness. As the wagon approached, a man emerged from the barn, rifle ready until he recognized the deputy. "That's Miguel, Liam's foreman," the deputy explained. "Good man. Been running things since the boss was shot." Miguel approached as they halted in the yard. "Deputy," he acknowledged, then turned curious eyes to the women. Recognition dawned as he looked at Natalie. "You must be Miss Owens. The boss has been asking for you." "How is he?" Natalie asked, accepting Miguel's help down from the wagon. "Fever came last night," Miguel replied grimly. "Doc's been out twice today. Says next 12 hours will tell." Natalie's heart sank at the news. "Take me to him, please." Clara squeezed her hand. "I'll see to our things, and help if I can." With a grateful nod to her friend, Natalie followed Miguel to the house. The interior was unexpectedly welcoming, polished wood floors covered with colorful rugs, sturdy furniture arranged around a large stone fireplace, bookshelves lining one wall. In other circumstances, she would have taken time to appreciate the care evident in every detail. Miguel led her to a door at the rear of the main room. "His bedroom," he explained, knocking softly before opening it. The room beyond was dimly lit by a single lamp. A large bed dominated the space, and in it lay Liam, his face pale against the pillows, eyes closed, a sheen of sweat on his brow. A middle-aged woman sat beside him, wringing out a cloth in a basin of water. "Mrs. Diaz, this is Miss Owens," Miguel introduced. "She's come from Silverton." The woman looked up, relief crossing her weathered features. "Thank God," she murmured, rising from her chair. "He's been calling for you since the fever started." Natalie moved to the bedside, her heart constricting at Liam's condition. Bandages wrapped his left shoulder and disappeared beneath the blankets covering his torso. His breathing was labored, his skin unnaturally flushed. "How high is the fever?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his forehead. "Been rising since noon," Mrs. Diaz replied. "Doc left medicine, said to give it every 4 hours and keep him cool as possible." Natalie nodded, removing her traveling jacket. "I'll sit with him now. You should rest." The woman hesitated. "You sure, miss? Been a long journey for you." "I'm certain," Natalie affirmed, taking the cloth from Mrs. Diaz's hand. "Please show my friend to wherever we'll be staying, and perhaps some food would be welcome." After they left, Natalie pulled the chair closer to the bed and gently bathed Liam's face with the cool cloth. His eyelids flickered at her touch but didn't open. "I'm here, Liam," she said softly, taking his right hand in hers. "I'm right here with you." For hours, Natalie maintained her vigil, cooling his fevered skin, speaking softly to him, administering the medicine when due. Clara looked in periodically, bringing fresh water and eventually urging Natalie to eat something, which she did without leaving Liam's side. Near midnight, Liam became restless, muttering incoherently, his head turning from side to side on the pillow. Natalie leaned closer, trying to make out his words. "Ribbon," he mumbled, his fingers plucking at the blanket. "Lost the ribbon. Need to find—" "It's safe, Liam," she assured him, though unsure if he could hear her. "The ribbon is safe." His eyes opened suddenly, unfocused with fever. "Natalie?" "Yes," she replied, squeezing his hand. "I'm here." "Promise to come back," he said, his voice hoarse. "Never made it. Should have written." Natalie realized he was caught in the past, his feverish mind returning to their separation 15 years ago. "It's all right," she soothed, stroking his hair back from his forehead. "That's all behind us now." "Love you," Liam murmured, his eyes drifting closed again. "Always loved you." Tears pricked at Natalie's eyes as she continued her ministrations. Whether fever-induced or genuine, his words reflected what she'd begun to acknowledge in her own heart, that some emotions transcended time and distance, remaining true despite all obstacles. Dawn found her still at his bedside, exhausted but vigilant. Mrs. Diaz entered with fresh water and bandages, insisting that Natalie rest while she tended to Liam's wounds. "Just for an hour," Natalie conceded reluctantly. "Wake me if there's any change." Clara had been given a small guest room, which she now shared with Natalie. As she stretched out on the narrow bed, Natalie's last thoughts before sleep claimed her were of Liam's feverish declaration, "Always loved you." When she woke, the room was filled with afternoon sunlight. Alarmed at having slept so long, Natalie hurried back to Liam's room, only to find the doctor, a gruff older man with kind eyes, examining his patient. "Ah, Miss Owens," he greeted her. "Mrs. Diaz said you'd been up most of the night. Good thing you got some rest." "How is he?" Natalie asked, moving closer to the bed. Liam appeared to be sleeping naturally now. His color improved. "Fever broke about an hour ago," the doctor replied, packing instruments into his bag. "Wounds are clean, no sign of serious infection. He's a lucky man." Relief washed over her. Will he recover fully? Barring complications, yes. Shoulder wound will leave him stiff for a while. Might always bother him in damp weather. But he'll keep the arm, which wasn't certain yesterday. Natalie shuddered at how close they'd come to a much worse outcome. "When will he wake?" "Soon, I expect. Body's exhausted from fighting the fever." "Let him sleep as much as possible, but get some broth into him when he's awake." The doctor closed his bag and regarded her thoughtfully. "You came a long way very quickly, young lady." "I came as soon as I heard," Natalie said simply. The doctor nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. "Best medicine he could ask for. I'll check back tomorrow, but send for me if there's any change for the worse." After he left, Natalie resumed her place beside the bed. This time, she studied Liam's features more carefully, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar above his right eyebrow that hadn't been there 15 years ago, the strong jaw now covered with several days' worth of beard. A face that had matured, bearing the marks of experience, yet still essentially the same one she'd loved in her youth. As evening approached, Liam stirred, his eyes opening slowly, blinking against even the dim light of the room. When his gaze focused on Natalie, confusion gave way to wonder. "Am I dreaming?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. Natalie smiled, tears of relief threatening. "No dream. I'm really here." Liam tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his injuries. Natalie gently pressed him back against the pillows. "Careful," she admonished. "You're not ready to be moving about yet." "How long have you been here?" Liam asked, his eyes never leaving her face. "Since last night. Sheriff Miller received word of your injury, and Clara and I came immediately." Understanding dawned in Liam's expression. "You weren't due to visit for another week." "Plans changed," Natalie said simply. Liam reached for her hand, his grip weak but determined. "You came when I needed you." "Of course I did." Those simple words seemed to convey everything that mattered. Liam's eyes filled with emotion as he looked at her, and Natalie felt her own heart expanding to accommodate feelings she'd denied for too long. "Water?" Liam requested, and Natalie helped him drink from a glass on the bedside table. "The doctor says you'll recover," she told him. "But you need rest and nourishment. Mrs. Diaz has broth prepared whenever you feel strong enough." "Later," Liam said, still holding her hand. "First, tell me you're not just here because I was shot. Tell me you would have come anyway." Natalie met his gaze steadily. "I would have come anyway," she confirmed, "though I would have preferred less dramatic circumstances for my first visit." A smile tugged at Liam's lips. "Never could do things the easy way." "So I've noticed," Natalie replied dryly. Liam's expression grew more serious. The rustlers, did they catch them all? Most of them, from what the sheriff said. Miguel can tell you more when you're stronger. Liam nodded, seemingly satisfied. And the ranch? Everything running all right? Miguel appears to have matters well in hand, Natalie assured him. The cattle are safe. The hands are all accounted for. Your only job now is to heal. Liam relaxed slightly at this news. How long can you stay? The question held more than casual interest, and Natalie considered her answer carefully. Clara needs to return for school next week, but I've left the store in capable hands. I could stay longer, if needed. Needed, Liam repeated softly. Yes, I think that's the word. Over the next few days, Liam's strength returned gradually. He progressed from broth to solid food, from brief moments of wakefulness to longer periods of alert conversation. Natalie remained his primary caretaker, a role that felt surprisingly natural to her. Clara, meanwhile, explored the ranch with Miguel as her guide, returning with enthusiastic reports about the operation Liam had built. It's impressive, Nat, she told her friend. Everything well organized. The men respect him tremendously, and the cattle are some of the finest I've seen. On the fourth day after their arrival, Liam was strong enough to sit up in a chair by the window while Natalie changed the bedding. The October sunlight streamed in, illuminating the room and lending color to his still pale features. This isn't how I imagined showing you the ranch, he commented, watching as she efficiently smoothed fresh sheets over the mattress. There will be time for a proper tour when you're stronger, Natalie replied, fluffing the pillows with practiced movements. Liam's gaze remained on her, thoughtful and intent. Do you like it here? What you've seen so far? Natalie paused, considering the question honestly. I do. It's beautiful country. And the house is lovely, much more refined than I expected for a bachelor's dwelling. A smile played at Liam's lips. Wasn't built for a bachelor. Always hoped it would be a family home someday. The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to address it directly. Clara is quite taken with your foreman, Natalie said, changing the subject slightly. She's mentioned Miguel in every conversation since we arrived. Liam chuckled. Miguel's a good man, widowed 5 years ago, devoted to his daughter who lives with his sister in town. Might do him good to notice a fine woman like Clara. She returns to Silverton in 3 days, Natalie reminded him. Not much time for romance. Unless she has reason to visit again, Liam suggested. Should her friend decide to spend more time in these parts? Natalie felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. Let's get you fully recovered before making any such plans, she said pragmatically. That evening, with Liam resting comfortably and Clara engaged in conversation with Mrs. Diaz about local cooking techniques, Natalie found herself alone on the front porch, watching as the setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and amber. The air carried the scent of pine and distant wood smoke, the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounding her. In her hands, she held the package of unsent letters she'd brought from Silverton. 15 years of thoughts and feelings, preserved on paper but never shared. Until now. The sound of the front door opening broke her reverie. Miguel stepped onto the porch, looking surprised to find her there. Miss Owens, forgive me for disturbing you, he said, starting to retreat. You're not disturbing me, Miguel, Natalie assured him. Please, join me if you like. The foreman hesitated, then took a seat in the chair beside her. For a few moments they sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset. Beautiful evening, Miguel finally commented. Yes, Natalie agreed. The valley is lovely, especially at this time of day. Miguel nodded, his gaze sweeping across the land with evident pride. Mr. Hayes chose well when he bought this place. Many said the soil was too poor, the water too scarce. But he saw what it could become. He always did have vision, Natalie murmured. He built everything with purpose, Miguel continued. Even insisted the house face east, so the sunrise would come through the main bedroom window. Said it was important to whoever would share it someday. Natalie glanced at him, suspecting the conversation wasn't entirely casual. You've worked with Liam for a long time? 5 years, Miguel confirmed. He gave me a chance when others wouldn't. A Mexican foreman isn't common in these parts. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. In all that time, he's never brought a woman to the ranch. Not once. Yet your name? He has mentioned it, especially when he thought no one was listening. The simple statement touched Natalie deeply. Before she could respond, Miguel stood. I should check the herd one last time before dark, he said. Good evening, Miss Owens. Left alone again, Natalie looked down at the package in her hands. After a moment's hesitation, she untied the string and removed the top letter, the first one she'd written after Liam failed to return. With the fading light making reading difficult, Natalie nevertheless recognized the anger and hurt that permeated every line. The second letter was similar, the third, more resigned. By the 10th, written nearly a year after his departure, the tone had shifted to a melancholy acceptance. The final letter, dated 3 years after Liam had left, was different. In it, she'd written of her decision to accept Richard's proposal, explaining her reasons and expressing a hope that wherever Liam was, he had found happiness. I release you from any promises made, she had written. And in doing so, perhaps I finally release myself as well. Natalie? Liam's voice startled her. She looked up to find him standing in the doorway, leaning heavily on a cane but upright for the first time since her arrival. You shouldn't be up, she scolded, quickly gathering the letters. The doctor said at least another day of bed rest. Needed to see the sunset, Liam replied, slowly making his way to the chair Miguel had vacated. And to see you. As he lowered himself carefully into the seat, Natalie noticed his gaze fixed on the letters in her hands. What are those? For a moment she considered deflecting the question, but honesty seemed the only appropriate path now. Letters I wrote to you, after you left. I never sent them. Liam's expression grew solemn. May I see them? Natalie hesitated, then handed him the package. They're not pleasant reading, especially the early ones. I deserve every word, I'm sure, Liam said quietly. As the last light faded from the sky, Liam read by the glow of the lamp shining through the window behind them. Natalie watched his face, noting the pain that crossed it at certain passages, the occasional nod of acknowledgement, the softening of his expression toward the later letters. When he finished, he carefully retied the string around the package and returned it to her. Thank you for sharing these with me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It couldn't have been easy. No, Natalie agreed. But perhaps necessary. Liam gazed out at the darkening valley, his profile strong against the twilight sky. I thought about writing to you so many times, he admitted. Started dozens of letters, never found the right words. Why not try now? Natalie suggested softly. Liam turned to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. Now? Tell me what those letters would have said, she clarified. I've shown you my heart from those years. Show me yours. For a long moment, Liam was silent, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. The first letter would have told you I was sorry for leaving, that my brother's death had changed everything, that I needed time to make sense of it all. The second would have described the Rangers, the dangerous work, my fear that loving me would only bring you pain. He paused, his gaze never leaving hers. The third would have confessed that I thought of you every night before sleep, wondering if you were happy, if you'd moved on. Natalie listened, transfixed, as years of unspoken thoughts flowed from him. Later letters would have told you about the men I tracked, The nights under the stars, the loneliness of the trail. How your ribbon was the first thing I touched each morning and the last each night. His voice grew more certain as he continued. I would have written about leaving the Rangers, about finding this valley, about building this house with you in mind, even when I believed you were lost to me forever. The night had fully descended now, stars appearing one by one in the vast sky above them. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the valley. And the final letter? Natalie prompted when Liam fell silent. He reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. The final letter would have said simply that I never stopped loving you, that every day without you felt incomplete, that if there was even the slightest chance you could forgive me, I would spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of that forgiveness. Natalie felt tears welling in her eyes, the walls around her heart crumbling completely. It seems we've both carried each other all these years, she said softly, even when we thought we'd let go. Liam's hand tightened on hers. I don't want to let go again, Natalie. Not ever. The moment stretched between them, filled with years of longing and newfound hope. Slowly, mindful of his injuries, Natalie rose and moved to perch on the arm of Liam's chair. Her hand touched his cheek, feeling the rough texture of his beard beneath her fingers. Then don't, she whispered. Their kiss was gentle but profound, a promise 15 years in the making. When they finally parted, Liam's eyes shone with emotion in the starlight. Stay, he said simply. Not just for my recovery, but after. Stay and make this place your home, as I always intended it to be. Natalie thought of her store in Silverton, of the life she'd built there. It was a good life, comfortable and secure. Yet sitting here in the darkness with Liam, she recognized that something vital had been missing all along. I'll need time to arrange matters in Silverton, she said carefully. The store, my house, they can't be abandoned overnight. Hope flared in Liam's expression. But you'll consider it? More than consider, Natalie promised. I think perhaps I've been waiting 15 years to come home. I just didn't know where home was until now. The following week passed in a blur of activity. Clara returned to Silverton, carrying letters from Natalie to various townspeople explaining her extended absence and outlining preliminary plans for the mercantile's future. Miguel, who had indeed developed a notable interest in Clara, promised to escort her safely to the stage depot in Cimarron, a journey that apparently required an unnecessarily early departure to allow for a private breakfast in town. Liam continued to recover his strength, progressing from short walks around the house to longer excursions around the ranch yard. Natalie remained by his side, learning the rhythms of ranch life and discovering a sense of belonging that surprised her with its intensity. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch or before the fire, filling in the gaps of their 15 years apart. Sometimes the stories were difficult. Liam's dangerous years with the Rangers, Natalie's grief after her father's death and later her husband's. Other times, they found unexpected humor in shared experiences or parallel journeys. I can't believe you were in Denver the same month I was there negotiating cattle contracts, Liam remarked one evening. We could have passed each other on the street and never known. Perhaps we weren't ready to find each other then, Natalie suggested. Perhaps we needed to become the people we are now first. 10 days after her arrival, Liam was deemed well enough for horseback riding, though restricted to a gentle pace and short distances. That afternoon, he asked Natalie to accompany him to a special place on the property. They rode side by side across the valley, Liam on his dun stallion and Natalie on the gentle mare she'd come to think of as her own. The October day was perfect crisp air, clear skies, the aspen trees a blaze of gold against the dark green of the pines. Where exactly are we going? Natalie asked as they followed a narrow trail into the trees. You'll see, Liam replied with a smile. Just a little further. The trail opened suddenly into a small meadow nestled against a rocky outcropping. A spring bubbled from the rocks, forming a clear pool before continuing as a small stream across the meadow. Wild roses grew along its banks, most past blooming now, but a few late blossoms still adding touches of pink to the landscape. "It's beautiful," Natalie breathed, taking in the secluded spot. "This is the heart of the ranch," Liam explained as they dismounted. "The spring never fails, even in the driest summers. When I first saw this place, I knew this was where I wanted to build my life." He led her to a flat rock beside the pool, where they sat together, the afternoon sun warming them against the autumn chill. "I used to come here to think about you," Liam admitted. "To remember our time together, to imagine what might have been." Natalie leaned against him, careful of his healing shoulder. "And now?" "Now I don't have to imagine," Liam said, his arm encircling her waist. "Now I can plan our future instead." From his pocket, he withdrew a small leather pouch. Opening it carefully, he tipped the contents into his palm, a simple gold ring set with a small but brilliant diamond. "This was my mother's," Liam explained, his voice suddenly nervous. "I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for the right moment. The right woman." Natalie's breath caught as he took her hand in his. "I know it soon," Liam continued. "Too soon, perhaps, after finding each other again. But I've already lost 15 years with you, Natalie. I don't want to waste another day." He held the ring between them, a question and a promise in his eyes. "Marry me. Stay with me. Let me love you for all the years we've lost and all the years to come." Tears filled Natalie's eyes as she looked at the man before her, not the impetuous youth she'd once loved, but the steadfast, honorable man he'd become. A man who had carried her ribbon and her memory through 15 years of separation. A man who had built a home with her in mind, even when he believed she was beyond his reach. "Yes," she whispered, her heart too full for more elaborate words. "Yes." Liam, his face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. Their kiss beneath the October sky sealed the promise, healing the final wounds of their long separation. As they rode back to the ranch house, hand in hand with the horses walking side by side, Natalie felt a sense of completion she'd never known before. The path ahead would require adjustments and compromises, her store in Silverton, the integration of their separate lives into one shared future, but the certainty of their love made these challenges seem manageable, even welcome. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Liam reached into his vest pocket and withdrew the faded blue ribbon. In the firelight, its color was still visible, though muted by years and wear. "I've been thinking," he said, running the familiar length of silk between his fingers. "This has been my talisman for 15 years. But now that I have you, perhaps it served its purpose." Natalie studied the ribbon thoughtfully. "What did you have in mind?" Liam smiled, reaching for her hand where his mother's ring now rested. "I thought we might frame it, along with your unsent letters and perhaps the first ones I'll write to you while you're settling matters in Silverton. A reminder of the journey that brought us here." "I'd like that," Natalie agreed. "A testament to love that endured despite everything." Later that night, as they stood together on the porch, watching the moon rise over the valley that would be their home, Natalie thought about the young woman who had tied a blue ribbon around her sweetheart's wrist 15 years ago. She had been full of dreams and hopes, unaware of the long, separate path that lay ahead. Yet somehow, against all odds, those paths had converged again. Time had not erased the bond between them, it had merely tested it, strengthening what was true and washing away what was not. "What are you thinking?" Liam asked, his arm warm around her shoulders. Natalie leaned into him, savoring the solid presence of the man she had found again. "I'm thinking that some journeys are worth the wait," she said softly, and some promises, no matter how delayed, are meant to be kept. Above them, stars wheeled in their eternal dance, witnesses to a love that had transcended time and distance, finding its way home at last.